What's happening, folks? In today's video, I'm going to do a 2-month review of the Fuji X100V. Now, before I get a bunch of comments, yes, I'm aware this is a ridiculous looking microphone, but my usual lav mic is broken and I just put a dead cat on this thing and I'm hoping for the best. So just roll with it, try not to get too distracted by this weirdness. Now, as with all of my reviews, this is not going to be a super highly technical review of the camera that covers all of the different features that are on this camera. If that's what you're looking for, this is probably not the place, I'll tell you that right now. But what it is a review of how I found it to be in my general usage of this camera and how I like to shoot with it, as well as what features that I've noticed it has that I think are useful or not useful at all, and just how I found it to be in my day-to-day use of this camera. I'll also throw up on the screen as I go through it a whole bunch of different pictures that I've taken with the camera. Alright, so let's crack on. Part of the reason I wanted this camera was it is compact. I like small compact cameras, and this is a pretty small compact camera. There are smaller ones out there, but I would say this is still compact but not pocketable. The body itself isn't actually that much smaller than the Fuji X-T2 or X-T3, X Pro 2 or any camera like that. But the difference is that the lens on this camera is smaller than most of the lenses for any of the other interchangeable cameras. The weight of this camera is 478 grams or 16.9 ounces, which I think is just over a pound. So it's not super heavy, and it does not feel heavy when you've been carrying it over your shoulder for a long period of time, and it doesn't feel heavy to carry around in your hand either. So it's pretty light, and yeah, that's a plus. It's apparently 0.1 ounces heavier than the X100F, so you would do well to be noticing that. The build quality feels very good on this camera. It has a feel of a premium camera as you would expect for the price of it, but it's also the 5th generation of the X100 series, so they've also just gradually refined it over that period of time and improved the build quality. And the buttons all feel nice, they don't really feel cheap. I don't feel like I'm going to break anything. I like this little snap-shut door on the side. I'm not so keen on the new designed battery door. It opens nicely, but when you close it, you have to push the clip back up to shut it. I wish it would just snap shut and stay there. The shutter button feels nice enough, but I did add one of those soft release buttons, and I like how it feels. It does wiggle around, but I think it's supposed to do that, and it doesn't feel like it's not supposed to do that. It seems like it's been designed that way and it just kind of feels nice. It fits. It feels like it should be doing that. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but yeah, shutter button feels fine. The focus ring on the lens has been a sore point for a lot of people who have claimed that it sounds like it's grinding as you're turning it. To some extent, I understand what they mean. I don't know if just it's not as bad on my copy of it. If I move it at any sort of speed, I can vaguely hear a sort of rubbing noise. I wouldn't really call it grinding. It doesn't feel or sound like anything's breaking. Maybe if I put the microphone by it, you can hear it. That's about as loud as I can make it grind. The aperture ring feels good. It has a good confident sort of click to it. You know exactly where you are on the aperture scale, and yeah, it's a little bit difficult to reach because it's so close to the body, but after you get used to it, it's not so bad. I like the little tabs on either side, just like all the older models did. Yep, aperture ring's great. A key selling point for this camera was the newly designed lens. It is still a 23mm f2, but it has been redesigned to be sharper at f2 at close range, which was a sort of Achilles heel of the X100F and all of the ones before that, but now it is very sharp throughout the aperture range, and you will not be disappointed. In low light, it is just as good as the X-T3, about probably the same as the X-T4 and the X Pro 3, whatever cameras have the same sensor as this one. And I also don't really see much difference between this and the X-T2. It's possible that the X-T2 was even slightly better in low light. I have not tested things like this, but I've heard that the older models are a little bit better in low light in some ways. There's a lot of differences, but it's good enough. I like how Fujifilm cameras do in low light. It does get grainy at higher ISOs. Once you get above 6400, maybe even 3200, some people are going to get mad about that. If you don't like grain, don't shoot at high ISOs. That's just kind of a given. However, I have shot this at 12,800 and I'm fine with most of the image that I get. They're grainy, but they look fine to me. I like them. Always kind of a contentious point when you're talking about ISOs and grain. Just do what you like. That's all there is to it. Now, weather sealing. Yes, this camera has the potential for weather sealing. It's most of the way weather sealed, but in order to be completely weather sealed or weather resistant, you need to put a filter on the end, which annoys me because it makes the lens bigger. But this is the overall size of the camera with the weather sealed lens. And if I take this filter off, this was the overall size of it beforehand. So this is the preferable size for me, but I haven't found that the filter really gets in the way. It's not that bad. I would prefer it not to be on there. And I originally thought you had to spend $100 on the Fuji adapter and filter, but I found one that looked the same for like $8 online, and I got a B&W filter that I already had in my camera bag somewhere that fitted one of my old Canon 50mm lens. And I think you can get that filter for about $30. So better than spending $100, but if I start to encounter any annoying flares or anything like that, or hear that the Fuji filter is just so much better, then maybe eventually I'll go for it. But so far it hasn't really affected image quality as far as I can tell. So yes, one of the bigger selling points of this over the older models was the fact that it now has weather resistance. Kind of. The bokeh at f2 or at any other aperture. Bokeh looks fine. It's good. It's not gonna blow your mind. If you're looking for the most blurred out crazy backgrounds, this is not the kind of camera for that at all. But when you do have it, when you're doing a portrait, when you're doing a close-up at wide apertures, it looks nice. I have no problem with it. The focusing speed is notably faster than the older models. That is a very nice thing to have. A lot of people who like to use autofocus all the time on moving subjects or want it to be faster will find this camera to be a lot quicker than the older models, and that is definitely a plus. I don't personally find it to be quicker than the f2 interchangeable Fuji lenses, but they are super fast lenses anyways, and I have not found the focusing on this to be too slow or to be debilitating at any point. I may have overstated that. When it gets very dark, when you're in low contrast, in the same conditions where any other lens would struggle, this lens will also struggle then. But for the most part, you're not going to have any issues. The minimum focus distance is about 4 inches, which I think is the same as the X100F anyways. It's nice to have. It's way closer than most people are ever going to shoot anything with this camera, but it's definitely pretty cool for photographing things in the house, trying to make abstracts or get really blurry backgrounds if you want. The rear LCD, which is covered in fingerprints right now, is upgraded to 1.6 million dots. The older X100F had about 1 million something. It's somewhere around 600,000 dots more than the X100F. Nice to have, not a deal breaker in my opinion. That's cool, it looks great. It's a nice looking LCD screen. And also, as has been covered in all of the other reviews, it's now a flip up screen, but it looks completely flush on the back there. You just have to sort of lift this little tab like so, and it flips up. You can also tilt it so it goes down slightly, but you can't tilt it out sideways like a lot of other ones. The EVF is also upgraded to now 3.69 million dots compared to the X100F's 2.36 million dots. So nicer EVF, easier to see, it's clearer. Again, not really a deal breaker for me, but it's definitely good to have. The OVF now apparently has better magnification, which is nice, and 2% more coverage, but it's not 100% coverage, which I don't understand, because the frame lines show within the viewfinder, the OVF, like it shows wide and then there's a square for where your frame lines are. So to me that should be 100, it should be 100%, but apparently it's not. Not quite sure how that works, but either way, OVF's nice to have. Most people are using the EVF anyways. Like all of the other X100 cameras, it has a built-in ND filter. The difference with this one is it's now 4 stops as opposed to 3 stops, which is definitely nice to have if you like to shoot at f2 in bright conditions. I've only used it a couple times, but the 4 stops I think made a difference over the 3 stops of the older models, and I do think it's important to have the ND filter in there because the maximum mechanical shutter speed is a 4,000th of a second, and most cameras, most higher end cameras nowadays will go to an 8,000th of a second, which is only a stop difference, but that extra 4 stops in the ND filter sort of compensates for that, so that's great. Now the D-pad, that was kind of a contentious issue with a lot of people, and they've completely removed it from this camera. And I really thought that I was going to miss the D-pad. I thought it was going to annoy me because I used it all the time on the X-T2. But I actually haven't. I've just sort of switched very quickly to using the joystick to move around the menu system, and occasionally when I want to use the shortcuts, I use the swipe functions on the screen. And maybe twice I've accidentally swiped something with my nose, but it's when I've been doing something awkward, I've had a hat on or something like that. And but other than that, it's not been a problem at all, to the point where I picked up my X-T2 for the first time in a few weeks the other day, and I didn't touch the D-pad on the X-T2. So if you're really not sure about this camera based on that, maybe rent it for a while, give it a go, but unless you're like a diehard D-pad fan on cameras, I think you'll be fine. You're going to adjust to it. And I have found that when I'm carrying this camera walking around, my thumb sits here where the D-pad would have been, so I do appreciate having that space now to just hold the camera. And if you're worried about programmable buttons, there's plenty of other ones. You can still program these buttons here, the Q button to something different, the push functions on the command dials, the button on the top here, there's a button on the front. There's also a lever on the front that you can pull and set that to whatever you want. So there are several different options for custom functions anyways, if that was something that you would have missed from the D-pad. This was one of the main sort of pain points for me. I like having a separate charger that I can take the battery out, plug it into the wall, charge it, and use another battery in the camera at the same time. But this camera did not come with a charger. It came with a USB plug that you'd plug into the camera and leave your camera charging, presumably into your laptop, because they don't give you any sort of wall plug thing. Either that or like use one of your smartphone chargers, stick that into the wall and then plug your camera into that. Maybe it's me being kind of old, but that seems annoying to me. I want to take the battery out and charge it like a normal camera person. Especially if I have multiple batteries and I need to charge 4 batteries at the end of a day. I don't want to slowly cycle through charging different batteries in the camera. I'd rather have a charger and then buy an extra charger and charge 2 batteries at once. I suppose this way I can take the X-T2 charger and use that, which I have been doing anyways. I also hate the X-T2 charger because I think it should have the prongs that go in the wall built into the charger and not a cable hanging off of it, which doesn't matter. This is not what I'm talking about. Bottom line, it doesn't come with a charger and that annoys me. The startup speed of this camera is fast enough. If you're holding it at your side and you switch it on, by the time it's at your eye, it's on, or by the time it's in front of your face, it is on. I'll even do a little switch on off thing here. Sorry about the prints all over the screen. It's pretty quick. Now it is not as quick as the Canon DSLRs that I use for weddings, and that's something that I've just kind of had to get used to. I did hope that the newer models after the X-T2 would start up quicker, but I don't find that they've really started up that much quicker at all. So I've just developed like a muscle memory to be switching the camera on and off or pressing the top button before I lift it up, or just always keep it sort of active so that the camera doesn't go to sleep, because I don't want it to go to sleep and then it just has that little bit of lag and I miss a shot or a moment or something like that. I'm going to briefly talk about video. I don't know enough about video or enough about what this camera is capable of with video to really form a good solid opinion on it. Going through the menu system, it shoots 4K at 30 frames per second and 1080p at 60 frames per second. I have read somewhere that it does 120, but I don't see it in my menu system. So maybe it's something I've done wrong there. But there's also no image stabilization in the lens or body, and it is not intended for video shooters, that is for certain. They are not aiming this camera at someone who likes to shoot video. There's also a lot of complaints of it overheating when shooting video, so I stuck it on 4K 30 FPS, pressed record, left it on my desk, and it was warm within less than a minute. It did not shut itself off, and I run it for about 3 minutes. It didn't shut itself off that whole time, but it did get warmer and warmer in that whole back area here, not in the top and bottom plates. This is where the battery lies inside though. I shut it off after that because I don't feel like purposely trying to overheat my camera for the sake of a review, but know that it does get hot. It's probably going to overheat if you run it for a long time shooting interviews, but if you're doing short clips when you're traveling or whatever, then it's not going to be a problem at all. And if you use 1080, it's probably going to even be less of a problem. But as I say, if you are a video shooter and you're interested in video, I don't think this is a camera that you want to be reaching for. So versatility is kind of a double-edged sword, if that's the right kind of analogy. It's a pretty small camera that's really easy to carry with you all of the time and photograph whatever you're doing. So in that sense, it's very versatile because you can take it anywhere and you could probably shoot most things with it. But the fact that it's got a fixed lens and it can't really zoom and do like image stabilized shots and stuff like that makes it a little bit less versatile. So it depends what you really want from it. So for that reason, I don't really know that it was intended to be a versatile camera. It seems to me to be a very niche street photography, documentary, sort of photojournalist type camera that does well in crowds or in quiet places where it needs to be very discreet. And this was something that I didn't actually cover before, was the shutter. The shutter on this camera was one of the main reasons that I wanted one of the X100 series again, and it's because it's so quiet. I believe that it's even quieter now than it was on the previous models. It's a leaf shutter, which I don't know what that means or what's different about it, but it's quiet. It makes this little tiny like clicky noise, and in anything other than a totally silent environment, I can't hear it. So that makes it really nice to get up close to people and take pictures without grabbing attention of people. Sometimes the like rattly shutters of DSLRs, or even just the noise that the X-T2 makes, is loud enough to get people's attention in most environments, and they will notice it when you're taking pictures. But that's different with the X100, and I like that. I did this in my first impressions video as well, but just to let you hear the shutter sound. Hopefully that made a noise that you can actually hear, but you get the idea. So in terms of the cost or value of this camera, at $1,400, I don't think I would say it's providing a lot of value. If you are a pretty serious street, travel, or photojournalist photographer, then it may be well worth it for this kind of money. However, the only other sort of competitors of this camera, like rangefinder style digital camera, and I think is a Leica, like a Leica Q or Q2 or something like that. And they're a lot more expensive than $1,400. So maybe it is good value. You could also go to the Ricoh GR, which is a lot smaller and doesn't have the viewfinder that this one does, but you can clip a viewfinder onto it. It just has a different focal length, maybe is slightly slower to autofocus or has less high performance features on it, but it is quite a bit cheaper than this as well. So maybe that's another one to think about, but you have to weigh up between all these cameras and see which one fits your needs best. So if you're on a tighter budget, I would definitely be looking at the X100F, unless most of the stuff you want to do is going to be at close distance at f2, or maybe look at the GR2 or the Ricoh GR3. I personally was going to buy an X100F or a GR3. The reason that I didn't buy the GR was because it was 28mm and I'm not sure I want to shoot that wide at this point, especially since there's not really any crowds just now. And the reason I ended up springing for this over the F was that I found this on sale for 1100, which made it kind of more attractive to buy, and honestly it was a bit of an impulse buy. I would have been fine with the X100F. My final thoughts are that this is a fantastic little digital rangefinder camera. If you like the 35mm equivalent focal length and you want a camera with a pretty silent shutter that has weather sealing, or the potential for weather sealing if you buy a filter for it, has a flip out screen and is great for street photography, then the X100V is a great camera to look at. So if you're still watching at this point, thank you very much. I appreciate you watching all the way till the end. Drop me a comment down below, let me know if you're going for this camera or going for one of the older models. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.